Hey guys, Kirk here, and thank you for joining me on a new video on the channel. This video is part 2 of our foliage material setup, and in the first video we set up our material backbone, which is here, our vertex blend, where we're blending our colours using our vertex colour. We're blending the colours based on that blend between the top, middle and bottom, if you like. We've got a subsurface colour as well, and that's powered, like I say, by our vertex blend. And we've also brought in a specular, roughness and opacity setup to control the visuals of our foliage itself, like I've mentioned this colour palette up here. And that's essentially what we set up in the last video. If you did watch the last video when we set this up, it may look a little different than it did when we did that video. There's a good reason for that, because as I've come on this morning to start recording, I was testing it out essentially on the mesh, inside the mesh. So I've opened this mesh up and I put a material instance in there to test out how it looked in here. And then I came out of there and went to delete the material instance and deleted the mask material instead of just the material instance. And that essentially wipes everything that I did last week. What I built here is the same. The logic's the same. Everything's the same from last week. I keep saying last week. It weren't last week because I do a video every 2 weeks. But essentially the last video where we built it up, it may look different than it did then. This is only colour wise and a bit of the structure with where the nodes are and the pins. That's the only difference. The logic is exactly the same. So don't worry if you followed the last video. In this video, what I want to do is to give us the ability to change the height of the mesh. So at the minute our mesh is set to one height. It'd be good to be able to increase the height of the mesh or lower it if needed, depending on where the foliage is and what LOD it's using and all that good stuff. So it'd be good to customize the height. Once we build that logic up, we're then going to create a wind animation, so our foliage is actually going to physically move. So yeah, that's what we're doing in this video today. To drive these changes, we're going to be utilizing normals in world space. So the first thing I want to do is add to this backbone here is a vertex normal node. We want the vertex normal in world space. We're going to utilize this node, and it's just going to tell our mesh where to form the normals from, which is going to drive our wind and our mesh height. So if we drag off there and get a reroute declaration node, in the last video I stated we're going to be using reroutes. As you can see, they're everywhere. So here we're going to do vertex normal. Right, so what change that colour? Choose some random. Let's choose like a reddish, dark reddish. Let's try and get it. We'll get it the same as this one, yeah. And that's nowhere near the same. And I just used the colour picker as well. Let's go to this edge here. Still not the same. Let's just brighten this up then. That's not brightness, it's colour. Let's brighten this up a bit. So it's a little bit closer, but that's fine. We're going to go ahead and hit apply, save that. To drive our height, like I said, we're going to use our vertex colour, but we're also going to use the mask. And I want both channels, so I want the mask red and the mask green. We set this up in the last video if this is your first time watching this video. In the previous video we set this up, Shift and A to align them. All we have to do is add them two together. We'll add them like so. Do that. And we'll, sorry about the noise guys, I've got a beard me, so my beard was a little bit itchy. It still is. So essentially we are going to use a lerp, so hold L on the keyboard and left click, and we'll use this mask to drive the height information. So we're essentially moving the mesh based off our vertex normals, which is going to be set up by a multiply, which is hold M on the keyboard and we'll drive that into the multiply, and then we'll right click and get our vertex normal. We'll drive that into that multiply. So we're going to adjust the height based on our mask, so our mask shape is going to drive the way our mesh is going to move, and then we're going to use our vertex normals to kind of clamp it to the ground. Hold S on the keyboard and left click at the scalar parameter, and we can call this mesh height, like so. And if I plug that into there, just to test this out, we'll plug this into the world position offset. You can simply right click on the output of our multiply and connect to world position offset. Not much change there. So if I go into the negative numbers with this, it should start driving down that mesh. Right, so and you can see there now how the mesh is going below the surface here, which is fine. If I go bigger numbers, it's going to start dragging it away from the ground, and the actual mesh is getting high there. So what I want to do is set a minimum of -5 and a maximum of 5. We'll set the actual value to a 0.5, like so. We'll just keep it like that for now. This could be more adjusted in the material instance based on the LOD. That's just going to be our world height. I will add this to the foliage parameters group. I'm not sure what's in there. So these should be 1, 2, and 3. These are the foliage color palette. So 3, and then this can be a 0, 4 actually. If I was to set that to 0, it would go above these, and I don't want that. That's pretty much it for that. I may add. I was thinking of adding our vertex color green, so I could change this based. No, I'll leave it then. No. Essentially, what I was thinking of doing is getting a lerp, doing that. Right click and get a vertex color green. Drive that in there. We'll get a vector 3 by holding 3 on the keyboard and left clicking. Drive that in there. Then we'll connect that to our world position offset. And now we could possibly adjust the height a bit more. And now what it's doing, it's actually just stretching the mesh itself. It's fine. And we'll leave that at 0.5 for now. I don't think I need this. In fact, I shall disconnect it and I'll just move it to one side because I might use that in the animation for the normals. I'll right click and set that to world position. Make sure that's world position offset. And then highlight this comment box. Oh, this could be our mesh. Mesh world height. So we'll set a font size of 25 and the colour could be some weird colour like that. It's simple. Right, okay, so let's get on to the animation. And we want to set our animation up using normals, but we're not going to use a normal out pin because that'll just display the animation onto the actual mesh, whereas I want this to utilise the normals to use world position offset so it actually bends the mesh. What we're going to need for this, we are actually going to use these normal map. So this is our normal map. I showed you this last week. We're going to drag this in, we'll duplicate it. So as an environmental artist, my first opinion would be to set these to a shed wrap or clamp. You don't want to do that because the wind animation won't work otherwise. This is a heads up. So with this, it's set up this bit similar to what you would do in a river shader. So we want these normal maps to animate. So if I right click and get a panner node, and essentially the panner node will move the texture. Like so. So if I put a speed of 1 in here, it probably won't actually work just yet. Put a 0 in there and a 1 in there. We'll duplicate this. In fact, let's just start again. I'm being lazy. Yeah. Okay, so we'll throw that in there. Duplicate this. Throw that in there. And essentially I want this one to affect the x-axis. 1, oh no, that's 10, 1, and in here I want a 1. So I'm using this as my x-axis and this is my y-axis, so I've given it a direction. We're going to independently control the speed and the coordinates themselves. So for this I'm going to get a multiply node. For the A input we get a time node, and then hold the S on the keyboard and left click, get a scalar parameter, and this is going to be called wind speed. Like so, and if I drive that into there and then into the time, like so, now this should move that, but it's not, which is not a problem because we've not got an output. So I do know it works, so let's not worry. We'll just set this up so it looks a little bit tidier. Like so, what I'll do, I'm actually going to utilise the world coordinates, what we used for our mask in the last video, and we'll use that for our coordinates here. So they're all running on the same kind of setup. And in here I can just S on the keyboard and call this wind mask UV scale. Now I need to double check. Oh, that's mask texture UV scale. So this will be fine. I'll drive that into there. We'll give this a value of around 50 for now. We can always change this. It's not the end of the world. Now let's drive these a little bit closer, make it a little bit neater. As you can see, one too many noodles for me. So I'm going to move this in. This goes into our time. Same for this. This can go into our coordinates, like so. Now to get this, move it up now. A little bit closer. Okay, so wind speed 1. As you can see, it's not really doing anything. That texture is really small, actually. But once we're starting to visualize the animation, we can adjust the UV scale. That's why it's like that. So we'll move that in a bit. We're simply going to add these together with this normal map. I could essentially put that in the world position offset, and you can see here now we're getting some animation, some freaky animation. That's really high off the ground. It's a bit weird, but not to worry. Let's adjust this so it looks more like a wind effect. So mask UV scale. Have you seen how the mesh looks like it's flickering? Essentially that's based off this normal map. If I open the normal map up again, you can see how, like with the waves or the ripples you do in a stream or water shader, it works off this normal map. So imagine this world position offsets moving down this world, this normal map. It's going to go down, then in the bump, up the bump, in the bump, up the bump, in the bump, up the bump. It's just going to keep doing that all the way down the normal map. So every time our world position offset goes down, it moves the mesh, and then once it comes back up, it moves the mesh. So obviously you can't see me now, but I'm waving my hand about like a moron. But it's kind of like up and down based off the normal map. And you can see it's flickering, and that is simply because of our UV scale. So if I put this to something like 500 instead of 50, it starts to move a little bit more, not erratically or sharp, But say if I set this to 2 again, you can see the flicker in there. It's waving up the mesh. The normal is waving up the mesh. If I make this bigger, like 500, you can see it's actually moving the whole mesh now. There's a good reason for this, and that's because we've not set up any form of pivot point for our wind animation. What I'm going to do is set this to around a 450. I'm going to reduce the speed to a 0.2, and we can see it's a little bit more relaxed now, not sending me insane, like so. Okay, so what I want to do now is to set up some sort of, see if you get a good look at that normal map there. If I close that back up, you can see it's completely changed it now. Just made it a lot bigger. But you can see we're getting a bit of animation set up here for our wind. What I need to do now is be a little bit more precise about where I want this wind to come from, what parts of the mesh I want to stay still, and all that good stuff. We can utilise our vertex normal for that, which is here. This is why we're going to use it. We're going to utilise our vertex normal. Before I go any further, I want to normalise the values that are coming out of this texture, like so. And we're going to use a node. I've never used this node on here before. I've used it myself, but on this channel. We're going to get a rotate about axis. It's actually a utility function, but it can be quite expensive if utilised the wrong way. As you can see there, we've got a rotate about world axis cheap. But I'm just going to use this standard one because what we're doing here is not that expensive. Our rotation angle is actually going to be our normal map. Our normalized rotation axis is going to be our vertex normal. So if I right click that and get our vertex normal, we'll just plug that straight into there. Okay, so now with this rotation, rotate about axis, I need to give it a pivot point and a position at which to start. We can use a vector 3 for this. Now this vector 3 is essentially X, Y and Z, like it would be with the what's it called now? Component mask. So with a component mask you have an R, G and B, which is X, Y and Z. This vector 3 can be utilised the same way. So now I want to set the pivot point. If I do this, you can see it's just all over the place. If I set this to like a -25, it'll move below the actual grass, even though it doesn't look like it right now, but it is actually doing. It won't look, my mistake guys, it won't look like it's doing anything. So if I right click this and go to our normal, error, we'll just go straight to our world position offset. The error is because we've not got anything in our position. So if I simply hold 1 on the keyboard, just get a scale of 1 vector, just plug that in and let it finish. And now you can see how it's using a pivot point. I'm going to use a vector 3 there. Let's just see if this makes any difference the way that's moving. Don't think it will do, no. So now you can see how the wind is being affected there all over that mesh. It's quite vigorous. If we lower that to maybe a 250, it'll become a little bit more windy. Which looks alright. That's fine. I change this to like a -50. And now it's getting a little bit more vigorous. Maybe a 1. There you go. But the issue with this, you can see the blacks and whites through the normal. If I disconnect that normal, that should get rid of that. There you go. Now we're getting more of a subtle. Essentially, this is what we're saying with this pivot point is the direction we want this normal to affect this mesh. But my best knowledge is -25. Even though it looks a little vigorous, it will sort itself out once we introduce the world height into it. But for now, our animations are looking alright. A little bit vigorous, like I say. Let's go to a 0.1, a 0.1, 0.02. just slows that down a bit. But I want more of a 0.5 in there. I say it looks a bit vigorous, but that could be our normal maps. Like so. The best way to sort this kind of vigorization out is to give us the ability to change where we want, or what axes, particular axes we want this wind to affect. So right now we've got our pivot point set to our Z axis, which is fine. I go a bit above, you can see that how the middle of it is all still, and the further it gets out, it goes all wonky and faster. And that's essentially what this pivot point is doing. But I want to control how much wind is going to be affected on each axis. So if I get a multiply node, I'll throw that into the B, like so. And if I right click here and get a new node that I've not used before, well, I said that again, a new node that I've not used on the channel before. And it said append 3 vector. And now I can control each axis I want. So if I do that and world position offset, I'm getting an error because I've got nothing plugged in. If I get 3 vector ones like this, let me just set this up so it's easier to understand, and I can plug this in to each of these inputs. And now with it set to 0, we'll get rid of the error, and now I can change these vectors. So in here, I'm going to adjust it to a 0.2. Let's see what happens here. And now we can see a slight bit of movement, but it's on the Z axis. Yeah? And with the Y axis, I can go to a 0.3. And now we're getting movement on our Y axis. And if I set the X axis like a 0.1, now we'll get movement on the, let's change that to a -50. That's a bit better. And now the movement is dependent on them axes, which we can set up. So what I can do now is I'll put these over here. I'll hold S on the keyboard, and this is going to be called wind direction. Power. Let's go for a power. Like so. So wind direction power, we've got that. We're going to highlight it again. And in here we're going to do a brackets, and this could be X axis. Like so. That's simple. Do that. And all I have to do is duplicate this 2 more times. Do this. And this one is going to be Y. And this one is going to be Z. And then we can just click away and plug these into their relevant inputs, like so. And now we're getting 0 on all of it. And now we can adjust the directions. So for all these, I'm going to set up a minimum of 0.1234 zeros and a maximum of 1. So now I've set all 3 parameters up with a slider min and max, and we can just simply adjust what we want here. So 0.0026 is that kind of movement, and in fact we'll set that as a default for all of them, 0.00026. And now we should be getting a slight bit of movement. Let's get rid of one of them zeros. Now we should be getting, it is kind of a slight movement, but a little bit too much. Maybe, there we go. And we're getting a slight bit of movement. Okay, so let's put one in there. Let's see what happens here. That's fine. So that's set up. What I want to do now is to add that in. So if I get an add node, hold A on the keyboard and left click, we'll add this to our world, mesh world height. We'll right click, world position offset. And now that looks a little funky. Let's increase that a little bit. We'll increase this one a little bit. Looks okay. Let's do a 1, 2, 5, 10. Looks a little better like that. So let's reduce that world height. There we go. Kind of looks okay. Let's drag this in here now. We'll throw that in there. Right click, world position offset. Now, that looks better. Because we brought our vertex color green into there, our vertex color is driving where this animation should start. And now you can see how the bottoms are staying still and the tops are now moving. And that is exactly what I wanted. Now I can increase that wind speed a bit more. In fact, let's just go vigorous with it. Looks more like it's vibrating than not. And we'll go with a, just go with a 1. And our problem is this. So if I go to a 150, 250, 500, 650, and now that makes more sense to me. Like I say, we can always change this. If I make this really much, now we can see that is loosening up that axis a little bit. So let's go to a 0.25 with that. And we'll go to a 0.25 with that axis with a Y. And now, oh gosh. And now you can see how the bottom of the foliage is staying kind of still as much as the top is. Like so. We'll set this back to a -25. There you go, a bit more leeway. Minus 35. We're getting a bit more vigorous now, so I'm liking the -20. There we go. And now we've got a little bit of leniency with our X and Y axes. And we'll leave this really low. And now it's keeping the bottom still and affecting the top. Let's go to a 0.5. And now that kind of looks alright. Now I've moved the mesh down closer to the pivot. Kind of looks okay. I can increase that back up as well. And now we've got a little bit more frequency. Increase the wind speed a bit. Like so. You can always make it really crazy, but why? Let's go to a 0.2 actually. Got a bit of wind speed there. There we go. You can always, yeah, we'll set this to about a 350. Our wind speed to go up a little bit more. Let's release the anchors on there a bit. Let's go to a 0.5 actually. 0.5. Now y-axis can be a 0.5 as well. And now it's 3D up a little bit. That looks a bit better. And that's what I wanted. A nice bit of wind animation there set up. A bit complicated to get your head around setting up wind animations, but But just imagine the mesh is flowing across this normal map and going up and down with that. Yeah, so I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to comment this off because this video is quite long. This could be wind animation. I've not spelt wind right, so I'll just do wind logic. A lot easier to spell, only because I can't spell. Go to a pink. Let's get the colour. Okay, so we'll drive that in there. Let's see what happens if I plug this in without that vertex colour. World position offset. Yeah, it's a bit more all over the place. I do prefer it with that. So we'll do this. Let's move this here. I'm just sorting it out, guys. This is pretty much it now. I put this here like this, and I can drag this over here and drag this over here. Let's close that up a bit. I'm going to call this our wind clamp. So, font size is 25, and the colour could be a serious black with no alpha. Yeah, alpha. There you go. Okay, so that is pretty much it, guys. We've set up our wind animation now. Quite happy with that. Happy with how that looks. There is a few more touches that I want to bring into this shader. But to put it in the context of a video for my channel, I'm going to hold on that logic that I want to add to this foliage shader. That will come at a later date. But like I said at the beginning of the video, we're going to be editing the landscape shader next, in which we can edit it in a way where it's going to drive our foliage on the ground. So yeah, I'll showcase that more in detail when we get there. But for now, this is it for our foliage shader right now. It's all set up. Copy what you've done here, or adjust it to whatever settings that you want. You could probably spend a little bit more time tweaking the axes and the speed and all this good stuff, and your colours and all that. Obviously, if I was to do that, it can take quite a while for a video, so I'm just going to leave it at that. The logic is set up. Jump into your material instance and add them in there, whatever you want. You could also come to the end here and apply a switch. So if you don't want wind animation on your LODs at like 2 and 3, then you can just turn it off there, because wind animation does cost. But yeah, quite happy with that. Okay guys, so thanks for joining me on this video. If you found it informative and it's helped you get a decent shader, then hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, share it with your friends and all that good stuff, and I shall see you in the next video. Thank you, bye.